Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. I welcome you all on behalf of IPS and staff to our very important program with the topic Islam and the West, Bridging the Gaps. I welcome all the distinguished guests, and especially Sister Lauren Booth, who's traveled all the way from UK, and we'll inshallah see and benefit from her talk and her experience. The relations between Islam and the West have always been and will always be an interesting topic to engage in. Throughout history, the ties have been dynamic and evolving. We've known stories of conflicts like crusades and coexistence like the glorious Spanish history, which the world misses to date. The colonial history, which nobody wants to recall, and now the post-9/11 era, in which countries have been bombed in disguise of bringing liberal democracy and civilization. In the post-colonial era, and especially in the post-9/11 era, neo-imperialism has brought far right to the rise. And with increasing far right presence and their coming into power, talking about this topic becomes all the more relevant and all the more important. I'd like to request Mr. Khalid Rahman, Executive President, Institute of Policy Studies, to open the program and give his remarks on the topic. Thank you. Okay. Can I request Sister Lauren Booth on the stage? And can I request you to give her a big round of applause for being here and welcome her? Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ms. Lauren Booth, our speaker today, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Institute of Policy Studies, its chairman, and the whole IPS team, I welcome you all to this important session on Islam and the West, Bridging the Gaps. I'm grateful to all of you for taking out time to join us here and contribute on an extremely important subject. Yet, while welcoming you, let me take some liberty to deviate a little from the subject of today's discussion by sharing with you the happy news about the accomplishment of another milestone by IPS. Many of you would be aware that IPS was founded in 1979. Though our work had started on ground in the beginning of the year, the institute was formally registered by law in the month of May, to be exact on 19th May 1979. Hence, by the grace of Almighty, IPS will be completing 40 years of its existence in the coming few days. Looking at the research and academic landscape of Pakistan of that time, that is 1979, it's a matter of great honor and pride for all of us that IPS can rightly claim to be the first institution in Pakistan which was established in the private sector in the policy studies arena. In fact, it would not be an exaggeration if I say that it was not only a pioneering or first in Pakistan, but in the whole of the Islamic world. Yet, while establishment of an institution was itself an achievement, the greater challenge was to sustain and move ahead without compromising on the vision, values, and the volume of the work on the basis of which the institute was established. Looking back at the past 40 years, we know there have been ups and downs and limitations, but those who have been watching IPS would endorse that as an academic, research and training institution in policy arena, IPS journey has indeed been a story of success. It is in this context that the IPS team recently decided that the milestone will be celebrated in all IPS activities in the coming months of 2019 as a gesture of thankfulness to the Almighty. Today's session is the first program as part of these celebrations. So I would be failing on my part if I don't express first gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on this happy occasion, as without His guidance, help and support, we could not even have taken the first step. Besides, it is also an obligation on me to recognize, remember, and honor all those people who have been instrumental in making this journey a success. This actually would be a list too big to name on this occasion. Yet, it would probably not out of place if I mention a few who have contributed to the Institute's work that is relevant to our theme of today, Islam and the West, bridging the gap. These actually are the people who, rather than stressing on the clash of civilizations or clash between Islam and the West, guided us to seek for opportunities and promotion of harmony, coexistence, mutual understanding, and cooperation, and hence helped us steering our move towards a positive direction. Other than the founding chairman, Professor Khurshid Ahmed, Dr. Mahmood Ahmed Ghazi, Dr. Zafar Ishaq Ansari, Ambassador retired Akram Zaki, Senator Raja Zafarul Haq, Dr. Khalid Alvi, Dr. Mumtaz Ahmed, Professor John Esposito, Dr. Anis Ahmed, Dr. Muhammad Umar Chapra, and Dr. Ibrahim Abu Rabi are some of the prominent names without whom this list would remain incomplete. Their off and on lectures, participation in IPS seminars, papers and write-ups, as well as discussions in IPS academic forums are without a doubt an invaluable asset for IPS. It is even more important to recognize that the association of all these scholars with IPS, including those who have passed away now, has been and continues to be voluntary. Such an arrangement, while reflecting their passion and commitment to IPS vision, has also remained a key element and the basis of a sustainable model that was conceived and has been upheld by IPS since the day of its inception. 1979, the year IPS was established, holds a very high significance not only for Pakistan and the region, but also the global political history, and thus to our today's subject as well. While the conflict, clash or tussle, whichever way one may like to call it, between Islam and the West and its consequent debates have been in existence since centuries. The direction these debates took in the recent times has been set by two extremely important developments in our region in 1979. This was the year when Iran had its revolution. Under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini, with Islam at its roots, and uprooting a regime which, for all practical purposes, was representing the West. The same year, we saw the Soviet Union, another, though a different face of the West, invading Afghanistan. And we all know that it was the resistance motivated in the name of Islam in response to this invasion that paved the way for one of the most significant changes on the face of global map in the contemporary history of the world. Though the developments in both cases, Iran and Afghanistan, have since then gone through many apparent changes, the fundamental dynamics by and large remain the same and continue to have an impact on the discourse on Islam and the West. Let me bring another dimension while discussing the landscape of 1979 as well as following decades of 1980s and 1990s. The year and the periods are also significant in the context of debates on Islamization in Pakistan, as well as in some other countries. This too, if not directly, in many ways relates to the debate of Islam and the West, as one of the purposes of Islamization was and is to offer a substitute to the ailing but still dominating Western capitalist system. In the given context, it was but natural that the areas IPS identified for its research had, along with international relations and Pakistan affairs, faith and society as one of the major themes. Consequently, Islam and the West became one of its most important sub-themes, and a significant amount of work at IPS during these years is related to various dimensions of this particular theme. I am happy that this program, which we are arranging as the first session of the 40-year celebrations of IPS, offers us an opportunity to listen to Ms. Lauren Booth over the same theme. You will agree that it is about bridging the gaps between Islam and the West. Then the best people for the job would be those who, not on national laws formed to avert wars, have considerably reduced chances of a large-scale direct military conflict compared to the old times. And that's why it is rightly regarded the period of hybrid war or war of narratives. On the other hand, it is not possible in today's world for anyone, whether he is a follower of Islam or a representative of the Western world, to spend his life in isolation. The ever-contracting world is constantly creating more opportunities and greater spaces for the people and the communities and societies to come closer and closer. Hence, if the so-called clash of civilizations is not transformed into harmony, cooperation, and healthy competition, it won't be possible for anyone to stay safe from the consequent adverse effects. Ironically, while very few will contradict this approach, the situation on ground is getting worsened. The rising trend of Islamophobia, the increasing number of hate crimes, hardlining and extremism in the political and social circles, and increase in violence around the world are but some of the visible symbols of this phenomena. This is the overall context in which we are holding today's program. I welcome you all again and look forward to an exciting talk and a very useful discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khalid Rahman Sahab. I would like to introduce, most of you already know Sister Booth, but I'd still like to introduce her to you. Sister Lauren Booth, she's a journalist, she's a broadcaster, she's an activist and author of the book Finding Peace in the Holy Land. She's a sister-in-law of former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. I don't know whether you like that reference or not, but still it's a part and parcel of your name, so it goes into every talk. She has been telling her stories how peace and light came to her when she was in Palestine. When I was rereading her story last night, there's one thing that clicked me and I'd like to share her words with you. There's an article called My Journey to Islam and the Reaction of My Family, and I quote Sister Booth from there. An immense feeling of peace and tranquility came over me. Peace and tranquility I never knew before. Such a calm that my tension in my heart went. There was no sound in my head for the first time in my life as an adult. Just deep, deep joy and calm. And she says, I opened up the Quran and Surah Fatiha looked at me like she was saying, hello, where have you been? Welcome to the religion of peace, joy, and tranquility. I had given up on God, but God never gave up on me. Sister Booth.
I testify there is no God but Allah, alone and without partners, that the Prophet Muhammad is the last and final messenger. I greet you with the greeting of peace that Muslims know, and inshallah we will share it in Jannah one day. First of all, I want to greet as well the esteemed guests. My dear professor here with a wonderful interpretation of the topics we're going to cover today, very useful for us to pinpoint those things. And I greet you with peace. All of my esteemed brothers and sisters, thank you for your invitation. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What an honor to be here and to be that first guest at the 40th anniversary. I can hardly believe it. Your work goes far beyond your region, which is good because we're not into regionalism. We are people of the Ummah and the world, as we're going to discuss, inshallah. The format today, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, is a small talk from me. I'm a storyteller. I found this out after years of being a journalist. I never wanted to go into news. I found that a very harsh, negative field to work in. Very vital, but it takes a certain personality. So I've carried on producing and making news stories, making TV programs, but I realized by the grace of Allah that storytelling, putting that information into a way that speaks to people's hearts is where my fate, where Allah has chosen to put me by His grace. So today is a series of stories with my personal interactions on the subject of Islamophobia, my experience of, if you like, traveling from west to east, maybe back again, we can see at the end. And more importantly, I'm here to hear from you and for a lively discussion afterwards. And inshallah, we will end with meeting each other, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. So, let's see if we can get this working. Bismillah. There we go. So by the grace of Allah, I came to Islam in 2010 after a series of experiences traveling the Muslim world, specifically Palestine. What I realized when I went to Palestine was that I had a very jaundiced view of what the world looked like. And it was really walking around the West Bank, going as a Christian to see Christian sites, that I realized I knew nothing about Christianity. And that I certainly knew nothing about the interface and the interaction between Christians and Muslims. And I didn't know my own faith, and I didn't know where I stood in the world, and it was like, everything fell away very quickly. One instance I will give you, for example, I remember being in Lebanon in around 2006 and going to see a garden where Isa alayhi salam was believed by Christians to have preached to his apostles. And it's a beautiful rose garden on a hillside, and there are stones, and you can see there are some scratchings there that are said to have been by the followers of Isa alayhi salam. Now, the man showing me in was Muslim. The man with the key to this very precious place of Christianity was Muslim. Now, I had respect for Muslims at the time because I'd been meeting them through my work. But I was still a Christian, and I wanted to know why Christians didn't have the keys. So I said, how is it that you have the keys? He said, they've been in my family 800 years. I said, how did that happen? He said, the Christians want us to look after this because we take such good care, because did you know Jesus is in the Quran? No, really? One of those no really moments that makes you realize you need to learn a lot more about what you presumed you knew. Fast forward to 2010. After a series of reassessments and some beautiful experiences in my heart, by the grace of Allah, I took my Shahada. Now, at this time, I was working with the Daily Mail newspaper. Don't hate me. I didn't write those headlines. I always say that I was a conduit for all the hatred, because I was the kind of lefty, liberal, feminist that everybody could hate, and that's why they put me in the newspaper. I also made it my job to get as many things about Zionism in my columns as I could, and each one was a small victory. Imagine then taking your Shahada and thinking, oh boy, what is going to happen now? For the first month after my Shahada, I hid it especially from my colleagues at the Iranian news channel Press TV. Now, this was the nafs, because I knew they'd been right about Allah being one, the Prophet Muhammad being the last prophet, peace be upon him, and I'd kind of been wrong. And I didn't want them to see me. Literally, I pretended to come in the hijab for work, but I was wearing the hijab anyway. I prayed in a secret room amongst Muslims. What is that? Wow, the human heart is funny. But you know what was really beautiful? Was that although I was going and praying every Friday at the biggest mosque in London, the Regent's Park Mosque, not one Muslim who saw me told the newspapers. Tens of thousands of Muslims saw Tony Blair's sister-in-law in hijab, and I could see people going, is that not Rahman? Is she Muslim? Nobody said anything. And I'm very grateful to Allah for that grace period, because when it hit, when people found out, I was going to get the full Muslim experience. So here we are, Julie Burchill. She wrote this article just a few weeks after I accepted Islam. It was not the last one to appear, but it was a really important one. And what shocked me was not the attack on me, but on the entire religion of 1.8 billion people. And following on from that, the silence of the editor when the organisations representing Muslims in the UK complained about the article. When a letter signed by them went to the editor, he didn't even respond. That was how low and how disrespected this community I had now entered was. The phrase that really was questionable was this: what kind of woman freely accepts a religion that routinely murders Christians, homosexuals, and women of strength around the world? Routinely murders as part of faith. Now, if that's not a hate crime or a call to hatred, I don't know what is. But it was met with silence. I wasn't surprised, because in 1979, I'd had my own prejudices. The year that this wonderful organisation and think tank was opened, I was at secondary school. And despite being a daughter of a leftist actor, open-minded, never spoke to the Asian girls in my class. We were the white girls, they were them. And I bring this up because I see now in Britain and in Europe we've come full circle. Because again, you're hearing this rhetoric in schools. So what did I know about Islam in 1979? Well, obviously I wouldn't speak to the foreign girls to ask them, so I just had to make it up in my mind. Again, I mention this because this is still the situation that many people across the West have. The basic knowledge is not there. Suggested knowledge is there. Suggested stereotypes are there, but the basics have not been communicated. So in 1979, I thought Islam meant 3 or 4 things. Number 1, Muslim girls had to have very long, shiny hair. Why was this a factor in my life? Well, because in 1979, the white girls shaved our hair and bleached them blonde, and we were quite jealous of the hair. Number 2, Islam clearly meant that girls did not date boys. And number 3, Islam meant that Muslim girls had to become doctors or dentists. Which is still true, but I don't know if it's Islam, but it's definitely Muslim culture. I mean, I remember going to school at 11 and you'd ask an English girl, what do you want to do? Don't know, miss, marry a footballer, become a pop star, write something. What do you want to do? Fatima, I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. Who says that? Finally, Islam came from Pakistan. Now, if you think that until the day I set foot in Palestine, this was actually all I knew about Islam, you will kind of touch on the fact that it's not necessarily prejudice all the time. It is a sincere lack of ability for us to communicate well what we're about. It is simply not enough every time there's a terror attack anywhere in the world for someone to stand outside a mosque and say, Islam is the religion of peace. Because even I'm watching it going, clearly it's not. There's been a terror attack. It's not enough. We have to be better at this. 3 years ago, Saida Vasi, Baroness Saida Vasi, warned, it's 6 years ago now, warned that anti-Muslim prejudice had passed the dinner table test in the United Kingdom and become socially acceptable. What did this mean? Her statement was a signpost, a red flag, that in a relaxed, semi-private environment in people's homes, a number of professionals, politicians, journalists, medical experts, engineers, that tier of society, were expressing views about Muslims in relation to our faith, but more than that, in relation to our thoughts, our perceived thought processes, our perceived beliefs, our perceived way of life, and daily thought process that, if applied and spoken about any other faith or minority group, would be deemed absolutely socially unacceptable, possibly even a crime. For expressing this, she was pilloried in the mainstream media, kind of proving her point, and the trolling on social media was intense. Baroness Saida Vasi is not alone. I was on a panel with her just recently, and MP Naz Shah, our British Muslim BAME, minority ethnic MPs, have the most appalling abuse hurled at them. It's as if, I'm not saying it is, it's as if the mainstream does not want Muslim women in the public realm. Which is odd, because the counter narrative is we have to rescue Muslim women so they can come into the public realm. Two push and pulls going on at the same time that make no sense. At the same time, there's an inability even to decide what Islamophobia is. Can you believe, with all the attacks going on right now in the United Kingdom, that, and there have been many, a man drove into 2 Ramadans ago, Darren Osborne, drove into a group of worshippers outside the Finsbury Park Mosque, killing, maiming. It took days for it to be called a terror attack. It was called an incident, then upgraded to an attack, and then finally a terror attack. He had been radicalized in 30 days. In 30 days of reading headlines, of seeing right-wing propaganda about Muslims, he had decided to go and kill them. Now, we have the spotlight. I'm often asked when I deliver talks, by the grace of Allah, I do speak a lot to Christian groups, mainstream groups. What are you doing about radicalization? Nothing. I'm literally doing nothing about radicalization in the Muslim community in the UK. You know why? It's never directly been a conversation I've had with anyone. No one has come to me and said, would you like to join IS? Would your daughters like to come and join Daesh? It's not a thing that is major. We have other major things going on. Now, that's not to say it doesn't happen. Unfortunately, many Muslims in the UK will know a friend who knows a friend whose daughter did go, or who thought about doing something awful. But it's not our main concern, because it's not from our deen and it's not in our lives. After Christchurch, that terrible massacre that took place recently in New Zealand, Andy Burnham, the mayor of Manchester, came to the British Muslim Heritage Centre, which I'm sure many of you will know in Manchester, and he gave a speech to express his sorrow and to stand with the Muslim community, which I thought was going to be positive. When he delivered the speech, excuse me, I was really insulted, because he felt the need to say, Islamophobia, this attack comes from the same place as anti-Semitism. It's all one, and this is where it comes from. Incorrect. Part of that racialized hatred of the other comes from the same place. But just as there can be groups who specifically target Jews, there are groups now specifically funded to propel hatred of Muslims. And unless we accept that as a specific, we're not going to find any route out of it. I thought it was offensive. I thought it downgraded the importance of the moment, and perhaps you can raise that, inshallah, in the Q&A. Let me run this past you. Mainstream writers produce articles like this. Islamophobia implies that there is nothing rationally to fear from Islam worldwide. When if you're a woman, a homosexual, an apostate, a non-Muslim, a Jew, a rape victim, a minority, pro-rule of law, pro-democracy, or anything remotely supportive of Western ideals, you have much to fear. Surely that is far-right rhetoric handed out by some extremists. No. This appeared on the Daily Telegraph website in 2010. Much more of the same and worse has appeared since. I struggled, as I've said before, with my own view of what the Muslim world was, perhaps based partly on some rather broad stereotypes. By the way, I did enjoy this film. We can discuss what you thought of it afterwards as well. I had some prejudices of my own, and in 2006 I remember meeting the head of the Islam channel. His name is Muhammad Ali. Hands up who's ever watched the Islam channel. Anybody? Now that's interesting, thank you, because in Karachi a lot of people put their hands up, so maybe I need to talk to the marketing department in the Islam channel and say, you've got to do something about Islamabad. If you're watching. I met with Muhammad Ali as a non-Muslim. He was going to speak to me about some work. He came with his head of programs, Carl Arundel, not Muslim, to meet me. And we met in a major London location. Now, when he walked in, Muhammad Ali had a thobe on, topi, long beard, and he sat down, and what's the first thing that I did? When sitting with a person of faith for the first time, I did this. Yeah, waiter, can I have a bottle of wine, please? Right? Why did I do that? I raise this because it's an incident that I put in the book, Finding Peace in the Holy Land, my memoir. And the reason I can remember it is because I kept diaries. And the diaries sometimes I read with my daughters who are like, Mum, I can't believe you thought that about Muslims. Nor can I. But it's really important to share these. So I put in my diary, I know it seems a bit off that I bought a bottle of wine, but at the end of the day, it's my country. Yes. And they seem like nice people, but if I want to drink wine and they don't, it's their problem. But look at how people's minds can be changed. Muhammad Ali, when he saw the wine coming to the table, looked at me. I'm just going to grab, may I have a tissue, please? With a runny nose. It's the hot and the cold from the heat outside to the cool inside, you know? Thank you. So the wine came to the table. Muhammad Ali said to me very gently, "Dear Miss Booth, before you drink your wine, I have two things to say. Firstly, as a Muslim, I'm not allowed to sit here while you drink it. I'm very, very sorry, but I won't be able to stay while you drink your wine. Secondly, the Islam channel can't pay for it." I don't know which annoyed me more. But my associate, Carl, will be happy to pay for it. He's not Muslim. Carl looked like, really? And then he did something very, very incredible. He said, "I'm going to go outside and I will make a few phone calls while you enjoy your wine. As soon as you're finished, we can continue our meeting." He went outside. He was on the phone. It was a cold, windy day. And I could see him walking up and down outside. And I poured myself a wine. And I felt something in my heart. It was different from the anxiety pains I'd been having. It was really uncomfortable. And then I realized what the feeling was. Shame. Shame. When had I gone from being a child who liked to talk to God and pray to an adult who would deliberately, not deliberately, but would disrespect a man of faith in order to drink alcohol during the day? I sent the wine away and Mr. Ali came back in. And then he said something that really amazed me. He said, "We'd like to offer you a job at the Islam channel." As our main interviewer, I said, "Are you sure? You know what I'm like?" He's like, "We're sure." All of this is covered in my book. I bring it up because it's a thought of how we can tackle hatred. Our manners, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, taught, our manners are a definite way through. They can have a bigger impact on a one-to-one basis than any headline, any stereotype, any news piece. Pakistani men in particular are targeted for hatred at this time and fear in the current climate. Awful grooming scandals of young women have been uncovered. Appalling abuse by groups of men who sadly introduce themselves to police as practicing Muslims. It's a big damage to us, this. A friend of mine is a well-known solicitor in Manchester. She was representing a man who was accused of having relations with a 14-year-old girl and abusing several others. And he went to the police and he said, "You can't arrest me, I'm a practicing Muslim." Now, when the police and when the prosecutors see the absolute weight of evidence, and this man saying, "I'm a practicing Muslim," it's very easy to say 1 plus 1 equals 2. Here we are again. With deliberate ease, the rhetoric of national papers and news channels is at times identical to that of right-wing groups. Men abuse women in the same numbers in every category. In fact, when it's broken down, of course, proportionally, white men in the UK sadly abuse more women, but they don't get the same headlines. It goes back to the 10 steps of genocide, which I would actually ask each one of you to go and look up. 10 steps of genocide. Othering, painting of fear, sexual crimes. These are all things that grow a climate of hatred. And what's the real effect of these headlines? I lost my white prejudice when I came to Islam, and I always say the worst thing about losing something is when you didn't know you had it in the first place. I didn't know I had white privilege until I came to Islam, started wearing a scarf, and I was walking in the hills one day with my 2 daughters, also in scarves. And a man in his 40s driving past went, "Terrorists!" We went, "Where?" We're like, "Oh, right, us." Because we had backpacks on, because we're hiking. We're looking, really? Right, okay. Subhanallah. One day, not long ago, I was driving down the M6 from Manchester to Birmingham. A car full of young men driving past me and my daughters did this. Pew, pew, pew. I got my daughter to call the police. He had a knock on the door the next day. He won't be doing that again. She took a photo of his number plate. But we have to encourage, this is the state we're in the UK and in Europe right now. We have meetings. We're training our young women to do Thai boxing, to do, self-defense courses. This is our reality. And the online abuse, well, if I've heard go back to Saudi Arabia once, I've heard it 100 times. Let's have a look. Bismillah. Terminology matters. Modern propaganda uses all the media available to spread its message, including social media, press, radio, TV, film, posters, meetings, billboards, speeches, monuments, books, plays, comic strips, cultural events, company reports. Does anybody remember seeing this? Tour of Duty. Don't let your kids play that game. Please, I'm not going to ask for show of hands. Don't let your kids play any shoot-'em-up game, okay? This was, I won't go into that. Anyway, just don't do it. If you know why it was designed and who by, you wouldn't let them do it. But in one of these games, and I believe it was Tour of Duty, there was pages of the Quran on the ground, and the soldiers were trampling them during the game. Even in a cartoon called Fireman Sam in the UK, in one episode, pages of the Quran were scattered around, and the characters, this is a cartoon made for 3- and 4-year-olds, were walking all over them. Now, when the illustrators were called up on this, and the BBC, they said, "We didn't know." Come on. You don't know what's going into the frame of your cartoon, that your name's going on. Everything is being used to spread propaganda. Some of these media uses may be surprising, but that only serves to show how easy it is not to recognize propaganda as such. I've had first-hand experience of how this works and how it can be quite subtle. In 2006, as I said, I went to Palestine and I had a crash course in being a conflict journalist, which I wasn't, by the way. I'd only met 2 Arabs in my life, didn't speak Arabic, I'd never been to the Middle East. When I arrived at Tel Aviv, I didn't even know how to get from Israel to Palestine. Should have done my research, but something in my heart made me go, and I had a big crash course in learning. This is a camp in, I want to say Jenin or Jabalia in Gaza. These children, I asked them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They were living on the rubble of their recently bulldozed homes. They were living in tents on the rubble of their homes. What do you want to be when you grow up? I asked it partly to stop myself from crying. I dug my fingernails into my hand unprepared for the feeling of seeing children in this awful oppressive state. And the answers that came back made me swallow over rocks for many hours. One said, through a translator, "I want to be a doctor." The next said, "I want to be a teacher." The third said, "I want to be a psychotherapist." These are children, refugees living on rubble. What dreams, what hopes. I said, "Why do you want to be a psychotherapist?" She said, "Because my people are in pain and I want to help them." These were the responses that I got. I was so moved to tell the truth as I saw it that I wrote a very long article for the Mail on Sunday, who'd commissioned me to go there. And I did, and I broke with journalistic protocol. I called the editor and said, Peter, don't change a word or I'm pulling it. He said, I'm sorry. I said, Peter, I feel so strongly about what I've seen. You've got a chance to do counter-narrative here. Don't change a single word. If you don't like the article, I'll take it somewhere else. But I want your promise in writing you're not going to mess with this article. Because I knew they could switcheroo. He read it, checked it, we love it, we're not going to change a word. I called all the Palestinians I knew. I called the consulate. I said, I've done it single-handedly. This is arrogance, right? Single-handedly, I've got a great article about Palestinians into a national newspaper, 4 pages of the magazine. But that's not how it works with framing. The only reason I mention the story is because everything has to fit into the frame. There are 8 major framings of Muslims and 5 stereotypes. That's something I deliver as my course. But look at the headline over these children. Which of these children will be a doctor and which a terrorist? Subhanallah. Not one child in my 2-week stay mentioned terrorism. Not one of them said they hate Jews. Not one of them said we want to get revenge. But this was the headline. Nothing I could do. It's called narrative framing. Now we have the narrative framing about immigrants. This was a recent, on the right is a recent cartoon that was in the Daily Mail showing rats coming into Europe in great numbers. See the man who's got the prayer mat there. See the stereotypes of the nose. See the dangerous looking woman in the niqab. See the atmosphere, everybody come in, all kinds of rodents you can come in. Now look at this one on the left. This was made in the Nazi era about the Jews. These are in the mainstream. Subhanallah. Soon after, the Daily Mail published this cartoon. Internet comments linked it to this work published in 1939. The work depicts a swarm of rats wiped from the doorstep of Germany, then delights as they're barred from entry from democratic countries, the same ones critical of Germany's treatment of Jews. Front pages. In 1948, A.J. Toynbee published Civilization on Trial. On page 205, he said, "The extinction of race consciousness as between Muslims is one of the outstanding achievements of Islam. And in the contemporary world there is, as it happens, a crying need for the propagation of Islamic virtue." That was in 1948. Less than 70 years later, a member of his family, Polly Toynbee, columnist, grandee, was confident enough of editorial and readership approval to write in the supposedly liberal Guardian, "I'm an Islamophobe and proud of it." Author Martin Amis in the Times wrote, "There's a definite urge. Don't you have it? The Muslim community will have to suffer until it gets its house in order." I won't go into this too much because I've spoken long enough. I will just say that as far as real-time effects goes, this is a drawing done by a primary school child, a little boy aged 5 or 6 years old. It became a famous case. And because of then Home Secretary, now Prime Minister Theresa May, she said pupils as young as 5 should be reported to the authorities for signs of extremism, which follows chilling comments from London Mayor Boris Johnson, he was then mayor, we know who he is now, who believes children should be taken into care if they have radical parents. A little boy did a drawing of his dad. When the teacher came round, she said, "And what is that?" He said, "It's the cooker bomber." It's a kookaburra, and the kookaburra is in my house. Now, rather than applying rational thought, this primary school teacher, primed by legislation, not just headlines, by legislation that means she has to report potential extremism, went and they called the police. The police went to the child's parents' house, traumatizing them. They were threatened with having their children taken away, all because a little boy could not say cucumber. Real cases in the UK. There was another one where a child had written about his family. What's your family? Where do you live? He said, I live in a terrorist house. The teacher showed it to the headmistress. The headmistress called in Prevent. Terrorist house? Terrorist. In a terror. In a terrace. See, I did it then. Terrorist house. Real impacts. So just to fill you in, I decided that if I was going to become a symbol of Muslim women in the United Kingdom, that I was going to take the fight, the challenge outwards. Where once I had been asked onto TV programs to talk about politics, society, anything from injections for children to how to move house to France, I was now only asked as a woman in hijab about hijab, burqa, terror attacks. I thought, okay, Bismillah, I'll own it. It took me a while, but now I accept every single invitation. The gentleman you can see there with his arms crossed is Colonel Richard Kemp. On that particular show, he was suggesting, in all seriousness, that perhaps Britain should have internment camps for Muslims. Internment camps mean rounding up all the Muslims and we let you out only if we think you're good enough and safe. He was putting that across seriously. In another photo on the left, I went in and I hadn't really spoken in public on TV for a long time because I don't like argumentation. I like positivity and I like new narratives, but I don't like arguing with racists. So when I asked the producers, who are you putting me on with? Oh, don't worry, Lauren, it's fine. It's not an argument. It's who are you putting me on with? James Whale is a shock jock. He is a DJ, talk radio, known for his right-wing sort of values. He's also an old friend of mine. That's what they didn't know. So when I saw him, he said, wow, you're in hijab. I said, how are you? How's your wife? How's your spiritual journey? He was so kind and so loving. I could see them going, what's happened here? But we had a good conversation and it is possible. So to conclude, what we need to do better is to paint our own narratives, to equip our coming generation and young people with the abilities and the confidence to actually talk about Islam as a positive way of life, to show it as not an alternative, but a way that improves everyday living. We're not focused enough on that because we haven't been training our young people to be confident in speaking. I do workshops on confidence for young Muslim girls. Public speaking, speech writing. We must allow our young women, and young men, to know the difference between pride and arrogance and confidence. I pray that I'm confident in front of you today. I also pray I'm not being arrogant. But to talk like this, in this time, as a woman, that's to be seen as subjugated. And that's to play in to the stereotypes. I'm talking for Western Muslims. I don't want to do away with haya. I'm not recommending anything like that. But do we have enough people able to speak in public? By the grace of Allah, my book came out in September 2018, telling my story of how I went from having those beliefs about Muslims, those misconceptions about Islam, to becoming, by the grace of Allah alone, a Muslim. And on the right, here's the news. This August, my book is being made into a play, which I will be performing on my own in front of non-Muslim audiences at the biggest arts festival in the world. Alhamdulillah. 26 performances at the Edinburgh Arts Festival. The first time, as far as we know, that a Muslim woman in hijab who's written, produced and starred in her own work introduces Salah, sections of the Quran and the Adhan to the British public. May Allah accept it. So that's my narrative. What's yours? Thank you. All mistakes are my own and all praises for Allah. Jazakallah.
So how's the adrenaline doing? Adrenaline rush, everyone? So we thoroughly enjoyed the talk and the radicalization done by headlines we saw. There are no coincidences. There's all a method. There's a method behind the madness. So, but we must see through it, and not only seeing through it is the solution. We have to work and build our own narratives. As Sister Booth said, we have to work on our young generations, tackle with their confusions, and connect them to the roots to give them more confidence to deal with what's happening around the world. Next session is discussion, questions/comments.
Oh, it's okay. No, I need a pen.
Okay, would that suffice? And there you go. I would like to take the first comment / question from Dr. Safdar Suhail Sahab, who's a Pakistani civil servant and currently serves as senior member of Prime Minister's Inspection Commission. He holds a PhD degree from Sorbonne, Paris. Dr. Safdar.
Thank you very much. On a very personal note, I think of Maryam Jamila of 80s, who used to write about Islam and West, and she was based here in Pakistan, incidentally.
Sir, would you like to come on the dais so that everyone can see and listen to you? I'll replace you on.
I'll take a few minutes before I come to my question. I just said that I was thinking of Maryam Jamila of 80s, who wrote a lot comparing West and Islam. This linkage in our minds of West and modernity, I think that is an important coupling, one would say, and I would like you to throw light on that. There was a time in medieval ages, you see, Maghreb, for us, Maghreb is North Africa, that's Morocco, Algeria, and that is the name given by us, Maghreb, Maghriba, as they say in French. And I have seen in medieval ages, when in France people have to say that who is modern, they would say, these are the people who are modern. You see, people in North Africa who had come from Spain, one can say, in 12, 13 centuries. But then we had this project of enlightenment, which we, because the colonial administration here established the educational institutions, so we took it all with, as they say, hook and sinker and bait, and we started believing, having faith, iman in the enlightenment project. But it was already in 80s that people like Foucault had started talking about the relationship between knowledge and power. And now the Enlightenment project is much better understood, and the role of power in developing in creating the knowledge networks, which we use the term more of narratives these days. So in a way, what she is describing is a restatement of the relationship of power when it comes to the creation of knowledge, which still is in the West. The control over the media, publishing houses, universities, soft power, that's all there. So that is also one of the aspects. But at the same time, one would say that in 90s, when I was studying in Paris, there was even a study in 90s that after the fall of Berlin Wall, a conscious decision had already been taken to work on the ethnic and religious fault lines in the world. And if you look at the PhD topics awarded in 90s and early 2000, much more focus was on these two fault lines, which were important. But at the same time, there was this philosophical work going on where post-enlightenment, post-modern, one would say, scholarship focused on the aestheticization of the self. That is, that instead of intellect, now it would be feeling and aesthetics which would govern the human behavior. Now, this is the fall of the reason also, and our sister has shown us the power of the social media, of the new media like cartoons, like these stories, narratives. These narratives do not address the intellect, they address the feelings. And once you motivate a person in feeling something, then there is pretty much little which could be done. I personally am very pessimistic about the things improving in the West. Alt-right, Donald Trump, in UK also. My concern more is the kind of stress these subtle forms of Islamophobia. You see, you are exposed, unfortunately, to the hard forms of Islamophobia in the West. What reaches us are the subtle forms of Islamophobia, which are much more subtle, through video games, for example. If you look at, we do not still have our own indigenous video game industry, but people would know that now the video game industry has taken over the feature film industry, and our children use video games extensively. And the 5 major themes which are problematic for us, number 1 is Islamophobia, number 2 is the racism, number 3 is the violence, number 4 is the pornography, and number 5 is the sexism. Now, on racism, the Islamophobia looks in its structure like racism, and your effort at distinguishing between anti-Semitism and that they're not coming from the same source as the mayor of Manchester said, that linkage is important, that what is the role of Zionism in creating all that we have witnessed here. But if we leave Islamophobia and racism directly attacks Muslims in the modern entertainment industry, and we uncritically use that. She has advised us not to let our children watch Call of Duty and Tour of Duty, but we do not have a proper scholarship on the modern creative industries in Pakistan. We do not have the rating on these 5 major criteria. Our government, our Ministry of Sports and Culture, let's say, does not have, we do have censor board for the films, but we do not have any sophisticated rating system for rating the cultural content that is downloadable and is being extensively used, and are actually young people are conflicted and having mental health problems because they are attracted to one thing, but intellectually when you give them the kind of stuff that our sister is speaking about, there is a problem. They are fascinated by, they are huge consumers of the entertainment being produced in the West, which has...
Stop with the clash of civilizations. I don't like that phrase, and I definitely don't like it when Muslims use it. Words matter, terminology matters. Islam is not a clash of civilizations. It is something that betters every person it touches. Do you see? So we might have we might have the ideals that others don't have, but if they had them, we believe it will improve benefit them. What happens is, the dawah of the West is so tempting to our young people. All right, so what you see in Friends, in movies, on social media is this lovely dating game. Oh, they're having fun, chewing gum together. They're rollerblading into the distance. And our kids are there, let's be honest, being virgins at 28 years old, living on their own. Is that normal? I'm just going to ask us all here. I couldn't have done it. We are asking of our youth what we maybe can't do. That's not natural. Islam is natural. So I am I'm not part of a movement, it's a movement of one, it's me, saying to our young, get married young. You know what they do in Malaysia? The young couples say their nikah at 19 and they go and study in the UK and they get their degrees and they come home and they build a life. 19. The guy doesn't have to give a house. He has to aspire to have one. He has to say, once I'm a surgeon, engineer, dentist, hopefully, please, Lord, journalists and policy makers, you will have your house. You have everything you need, my queen. But we're going to get there first. So by making the men wait and then telling the sisters, you can't rely on the men anymore, you better get your degree, you better get your MA, you better get your BA, you better get 5 years in work. That woman's 35, she's not going to get married. True or not true? So we don't need to copy the West. We need to get our Islam right with marriage. Inshallah.
So done with the answers? Yes, please. The brother here in the second last row. Can he ask the mic?
And please, if you have to leave, completely understood. You have busy lives, and thank you so much for attending.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum. This is Rahman from National Defence University, Islamabad. Madam, I would like to first. I have a comment and I have a question. First, I want to comment you and there are one of the prominent Islamic scholars of the 20th century, Allama Asad. Have you heard about this? He was Allama Asad.
He was the German revert.
He was a German convert Muslim.
Is he? Okay.
So, one of his famous quotes was that modernization is an integral part of Islam. So, up to which extent you believe a Muslim boy or Muslim woman should go towards modernization? What is the limit you set for?
Limits.
Can I ask a question too if no one has raised a hand? Can I? Yeah. Okay, my question is, this is your second time in Pakistan. You've been on both sides of the picture, West and Islam. So when you come to Muslim countries like Pakistan and many other Muslim countries you've been to, do you feel or see an inferiority complex, minds still being colonized, and how to get rid of that mental slavery that we still suffer in the post-colonial area, that it's almost impossible, looks impossible to get rid of that. And how are we so subdued without anybody subduing us? There are no chains around us, our bodies are free, but our souls and minds just die to be westernized somehow or the other. We want to feel cool. I mean, we feel cool if we are adopting those customs and cultures. How to deal with that? Only a person like you can solve our problem.
Well, there's many others, but thank you.
In this room, I meant. Yeah.
Barakallah feek. So those are, what have we got? We've got two questions. Modernization in Islam and the limits. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We all live in a modern context. Islam is not something that comes to hold humanity back, but to progress us forward. Is that true or is that not true? Can we all agree on that? I'm looking for points of agreement here. I'm also not looking for a fatwa against me. Just kidding. Some laugh, some whoa. Women were not held back. They were released from Jahil by Islam. True or not true? Did Khadija radiallahu anha have a job? She was the greatest importer and exporter of her community. True or not true? Did her husband go to her for political advice? Was Aisha the greatest acknowledged hadith scholar ever? Did Aisha train men? We have it all there. Women are supposed to bring the best that they can bring in the public space. Allah knows best. This is how I live my life. This is my understanding. Hijab came to allow us into the public space. It is our allowance from Allah Ta'ala, our protection and our ability. This is our veil. Why is it called the veil? You don't have to have a curtain right here to hear my words. I am curtained and I choose it for my Lord. Okay? So with that we have, where women are concerned, we have our behaviors. And you know what I love? I love coming to Muslim countries. I know that's going to surprise you. All you see will be the difficulties. Everything's wrong in Pakistan. Oh, we can complain. The rubbish, the heat, the buses. Oh, did you see the traffic? Oh, you know, you have a great leader. You're already complaining about him 1 year. What's going on? This is a human heart disease. Don't worry, we do it in Britain as well, okay? But we mustn't conflate that with, if only we weren't Muslims and we were like the West. In fact, I was having a very interesting discussion with a brother who facilitated me here today about a lot of these barometers of where's the best place to live in the world. Who's seen these kind of headlines? Finland, best place to live in the world. Norway tops the chart again, happiest people in the world. Now what's interesting is Denmark in around 2016, 2017 was billed by a research centre from the West, happiest place in the world to live. 6 months after that particular study came out, another study showed that Denmark had the highest purchase of anti-anxiety drugs in the world per capita. So they're the most happiest and the most anxious. Are they facilitating between the two? I'm happy, I'm anxious, I'm happy. That just sounds like anxiety and some kind of clinical condition to me. We are being sold a false image by neoliberals who understand storytelling and understand the media. The Prophet, peace be upon him, built hearts and communities, not buildings. When I approach, and people like myself, Western converts, people born in the context of the West, approach Muslim centres and say we'd like money to do X, Y and Z, no chance. It is virtually impossible to find the ease of a route which is forward-looking, to talk about Islam, to make movies. We have people very, very high up now in Britain making excellent, excellent work. I'll give you an example. Julian Drolon, he's made a film called Freedom, interviewed hundreds of converts around the world and made it into a movie. He struggles to get £10,000 for this. £10,000 from an ummah like this. People spend that on not a wedding, on the shoes for a wedding. So that's why we're at loss, in my opinion, is we're not forward thinking enough, and Allah knows best. Not that Islam is not forward thinking, we're limited in our thinking. I should let you speak, please. You have a microphone too. I'm so rude. Astaghfirullah, please. Jump in where you will, please.
Okay, we have another question from this. Okay, can I take a question from this side? Yes, okay. I'll come back to you.
I'm Dr. Shakil Qasim,
Sorry, a bit louder, please.
working in National Institute of Health as the Joint Executive Director.
Just hold your question. Yes, you can carry on now.
Before asking a question, I will like to narrate a short story of my son. The year is 2006, when he was 6 years old. We were in a place where the first terrorist attack occurred. And that place, that incident changed the whole story or mind of a 6-year-old son. After moving about 2 years later, I was looking at his school copy, where I saw a picture, a drawing of a boy riding a cycle, and he had written that I want to live in a country where I can go to my friend's house on a cycle.
On a
cycle. On a bicycle.
Okay.
and I was shocked. For me, it's not a wish, because I have lived in that time. When riding a bicycle on a country like Pakistan is not a difficult thing, but for him, it was a lifetime wish. I thought that we have so many gaps in our society. Instead of thinking or talking about bridging the gaps in the Western between Islam and the West, we have to do many things in our country.
Right.
We have so many gaps.
Right. And what is your question?
My question is, should we not look into ourselves without, instead of pointing to the West or to the other nations that
Okay.
they have done this thing?
Good.
This is
Can I
my
move on to the
question.
next question? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, another question. You told many things about the Islamophobia in UK and in Western world, but for Sadiq Khan, who is the mayor of most developed metropolitan city, which is the residence of most Protestant Christians, which are likely to be Zionists. How is it possible for him to win the election of mayor?
Mashallah.
Yes, please. One question on this side, please. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum. I am Vanya Batul and I am a higher secondary school student and an ex-hijabi. And I don't want to proclaim this in front of everyone. It's quite shameful. But I had some reasons. And I know you are talking at an international platform sort of thing because you're talking about everyone. But if I look in Pakistan, because I belong here, I have dealt with so much resentment and like if I'm wearing a hijab, I have lost a lot of opportunities and people have like never valued me for my intellect. And I have been in a lot of colleges and schools because I was dealing with, all the personal issues and I was like jumping from here and there and here and there. And what I've seen is that in the government colleges, which kind of are occupied by most of
All classes.
most of the people,
Yeah.
75-80% of the Pakistani students, I have dealt with more resentment there than at the private schools, where most of the students are like very modern. So I don't know what it's like in England, where the
Okay, great.
society is very much heterogeneous.
I hear you. Thank you so much.
Islamophobia at home. So we
Yeah.
have to deal with it. Yeah, and any more questions? So that we can go to the answer section.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sir, please wait for the mic, sir.
Please, sir.
It would be better if you some light on the situation.
Could you hold it to your mouth so everyone can
It's
hear?
not on.
Okay, the campaign that is going on against the Muslim, and there is a lot
Yeah.
of destruction already, like they started with Afghanistan and Iraq and then Syria and Somalia and Libya, and it's going on and on. It's a lot of depressing environment, and most of the people have lost hope because the power is on the other side, the media is on the other side, and everything seems to be in the leadership of Trump. Things are like, so what you can put some hope on this, that the young people can count on, that there are some lights that we will survive and we will do better in the near and far future.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you. Let's begin with pavements in Europe and your son. What's interesting is, I immediately thought, I see what he means. There are no pavements in the Muslim world because it wasn't a walking environment, right? Because traditionally you didn't walk very far because of the heat. So it's a different, I know I'm being light about this, but this is really important for me because I lived in Qatar and there were no pavements. And I was considered crazy for going and walking. So they've got lots of nice avenues now. So what that says to me, I think, is I think the young people are watching and getting an idea of society that is based on California. It's based on Paris. It's not based here. So their dreams, because you can cycle here, it would be hard and rugged and tough. And you'd better get a strong bell or a horn. But you know what I mean? Go out into the hillside, you'll have a lovely cycle. But it will be different. It won't be like a Disney cycle. So what are our kids watching in our homes? What is their vision of the future based on? I'm not ever going to say ban films. That doesn't make sense. But how are we enabling our young people to enjoy the context they're living in and respect it? Are we building up our heroes here, or are we very quick to smash them down? I see, for example, Imran Khan respected more in the West than in the East. What on earth is that disease in our hearts? I'm not saying he's getting this right or wrong. I'm saying, don't we build people up in order to bring them down? And aren't we warned about that in our deen? So building up figures of respect. This idea of everything better in the West. The pavements are better in the West, by the way. But that's because that's how we do things, okay? New York kids don't go out. So his fantasy about if I had pavement, if I lived in the West, I'd be living like this wonderful time when they all cycle. No, the kids don't go out. This is a global phenomenon. And that's where we, again, remove ourselves from the clash of civilizations. It's a social media world. I see the same problems in young people in Doha, in Delhi, in New York, in London, Muslim, non-Muslim. The parents are crying. So we have to address them with that reality. Look into ourselves and not blame the rest. Looking into ourselves, I think. Look, I take it like this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm a person of faith, so I have to bring it back to faith. How am I facilitating faith and respect and hope through that journey in the young people around me, and that self-pride and that joy, in order that they can live the life that they live in the context they live. So the two are not separated. The parts of the Western authority want us to become Jummah Muslims, or even better, Eid Muslims. They're the moderate kind of Muslims. The Muslims who drink and smoke, but on Eid they celebrate. Good old Muslims. Astaghfirullah. I'm making a joke of it. We're moving closer to it. And I pray that Allah does not make us of those that He speaks about, that if you're not good enough, I'll replace you. Okay, inshallah. To Muslim UK mayor. Oh, by the way, interesting fact. Who is the first Muslim mayor in the United Kingdom? What's his name? No. 1880s was the first Muslim mayor of Great Britain. Allahu Akbar. Okay? His name was Rashid Stanley. He was a convert to Islam. He was so integrated into he came from a high tier of society, and he used his skills in that it wasn't recognized, it was kind of hidden. So he's actually our second mayor, by the way. So that's a nice fact to share. Sadiq Khan is a great politician. The Labour Party is a great party. People vote for the party as well as the politician. So remember that. I think London is its own base. And what's good about that is it's so diverse that people will go, yeah, he seems like a good bloke, let's give him a go. So alhamdulillah for that. Could it happen now in other places? It does. We have lots of councillors, but not in white areas. And that's because we're not showing the best of ourselves in those areas. Hijab, undervalued with hijab. I think you were really brave to stand up and say that. I just want to say thank you for sharing that reality with us. I think it's for everybody here to look into themselves and think, do we treat women with hijab lesser than the Juji woman? when I first came to Islam and I started coming to the Muslim world, and I saw that the women who were promoted in the newsroom were dressed like Barbie dolls. I was like, what even is this? Are there no women in hijab who are good at this? Oh, right, you want to look like that. Oh. Men still run these industries. Men want women to look sexy. Don't do that to our sisters, please. I don't know what else to say about that. I'm going to take that away and think about that. Media on their side. We can complain about this all day or we can change it. Here's the thing. Invest in our young becoming. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf from America. Have you heard of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf? One of the greats of the West, mashallah, great thinker of our age. He said that as the Muslims are training doctors and dentists and engineers, we've got enough of them. And he described it rather challengingly like this. If you're a doctor or a dentist or an engineer, you're a manual worker. What? I've got 8 degrees. I am certainly not a manual labourer. I am a professional. I'm a member of the professions. But he said, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, you're paid to cut people open. You're doing stuff with your hands. You're paid to draw or to build. You're doing something with your hands. You are not. Are you making the decisions about how to cut, when to cut, where to cut, the policy? Where are our great policy makers? You have them here, but are we really encouraging that level of thinking? Where are our great icons? Where are our great journalists? We have some, but it's not encouraged enough. And these institutions to make it happen, inshallah. Once we do that, once we control the narrative, or at least get our narratives out there, people will understand us better, inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a wonderful discussion. I'll close with one comment. Just like Sister Lauren Booth said, everyone in the Asian families wants to become a doctor, or if he's a boy, he wants to become an engineer. And just as she said, she quoted Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, I sometimes say that they make you being a doctor and being an engineer, it makes you a good servant. It doesn't make you a master. So social sciences, history, politics, journalism, the subjects that make you masters are considered second line in Pakistan. We must change it. We must produce leaders through history, through politics, through journalism, and they need to replace some of the doctors and engineers. I'd like to invite Ambassador retired Tajammul Altaf Sahab, who's a senior associate at IPS, for vote of thanks and closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most beneficial, the most merciful. Before I start presenting my vote of thanks, like all other audience, I have one or two very simple questions from Sister Lauren Booth. I hope she will not mind answering that. And then, of course, we can proceed. I can proceed to my vote of thanks. Sister, is it your first visit to Pakistan?
This is my third visit to Pakistan.
Third visit to Pakistan. So I have clarity in my own thoughts. Second is, I have seen some of your writings, some of your videos, even your first book, and I'm waiting for the second one. I wonder, meeting you today and taking your words, that one night you were sitting in a mosque in Qom, and there was an experience wherein you were feeling as if there is an impact like waterfall or cascade of peace. Today, while interacting with you in this interactive session, we all had that feeling that we were sitting in the same ambience of waterfall and cascade of peace, coming to we practicing Muslims from a converted Muslim who was speaking from her heart and head together and giving us the message of truth, peace, justice, righteousness, and the right path. Thank you so very much. My first question, of course, the second one is looking you in this graceful attire, in hijab, and all that. You are indeed pride for all of us, we Muslims in the world over. 1.8 billion Muslims should be truly, truly proud of you. Sister, have you ever thought of taking a Muslim name, or is it not allowed under the British law that you cannot? If yes, would you please like to share that Muslim name with us?
I really want to share this question. Thank you so much. On behalf of my daughter, who is a Muslim called Alexandra, I would like to say that it is wonderful dawah for Muslims to know that, for non-Muslims to know that believers in Allah Ta'ala can be called Alexandra and Lauren and John and Fred and all of those other wonderful names. There is no need to take on a Muslim name. There are the best of names, and we may want to use them, but I noticed in Pakistan, most women are named after flowers, the moon, and beauty. But when you come to Islam, you have two choices, Khadija or Aisha, and maybe Fatima, okay? So, I like my name. People know me as this. It would be hugely I had to think about this. How counteractive would it be? Lauren Booth, now Khadija Ali, what? She's become an Arab. No, Islam has come to grace us and change our behavior, but not to destroy where we come from. Okay? Now here's the fact number 2 that's quite interesting. My name isn't Lauren. My name is Sarah. Allahu Akbar. I was born Sarah Booth. So if I wanted to revert to anything, I could just go back to my normal name anyway, and Allah knows best. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, this was, of course, an interactive conversation. Let me have this honor and opportunity to express a vote of thanks on behalf of the Institute of Policy Studies. We are indeed greatly indebted to Sister Sarah Booth, Lauren Booth, and whatever name he wants to take with her, because this is, of course, expression of her persona, personality, identity, which she is still carrying with her. No doubt she has become a true Muslim from the heart of her hearts, from her mind, and we are truly obliged that today she has given us the best of her thoughts. It was indeed a highly inspirational, insightful, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversation. In this talk, I was thinking each moment as if I am getting more and more educated in bits and pieces. Thank you so very much, sister, for making it convenient to be here amongst us in this family ambience. We are much obliged. I am also greatly thankful to the Institute of Policy Studies for organizing this very important session with the Sister Lauren Booth and sharing her thoughts with us. I am also thankful to Character Education Foundation, especially its founder, Chairman Mahmood Ahmad, and one of its functionaries, Mr. Inam Masoodi Sahib, for making this event to happen and giving us this opportunity to invite Sister Lauren Booth and also having this conversation with her. Apart from that, I think it is my unique privilege and special honor as well to thank each and every guest in the audience, because it was all that interest which you have so vehemently shown to welcome our distinguished guest and giving her the feeling that while she has already visited a number of Muslim countries, Pakistan, of course, is not the first one for her visit, but of course this third visit has given her more insightful thinking about the Muslims of Pakistan. I think I will be at loss if I don't mention the beautiful interventions, very thoughtful intervention of two of our discussions who came up with very thought-provoking ideas. And of course, I measure each and everything, value of time, value of our thoughts, and the way we came across wonderful ideas and thoughts from a Muslim sister, and the way it was going to our hearts, and what we have to do in the future, how to bridge that communication gaps within we Muslims, where we are failing, and how our men should think to give some better position to our women, their rights, and how we can encounter and address onslaught coming from right-wing approach. And what if at all sister is carrying scarf? It happened with me. Let me give just 1 minute. During my last post, it was the Czech Republic, and my daughter who came to meet us from Canada was wearing exactly hijab like Sister Booth. We were coming out of our official car with Pakistani flag. And believe me, the way my daughter was abused by a group of youngsters, the words which were used by you were of course resonating in my mind. It started with Pakis, you Muslims, you terrorists, extremists, why don't you go back to your land? We are no more ready to welcome you. And my daughter, who was in hijab, she said, it is my pride, it is my decision, and I can still maintain my life being a Muslim woman. How to keep it up? We have to fight it at multiple fronts. That is doable, that is possible. Let us not give up. We stand together by making our own judgments in a sane and wiser way. And at the end of the day, we can make the difference. Let us get our hearts and minds united, our like-minded people together, and spread that message which is essentially required to understand each other in various communities. Perhaps the best model was during the Spanish era, when Muslims, Christians, and Jews were living together side by side, consulting one another and taking the best of their practices, religious practices, and making a homogeneous society. If that was doable in the past, that is doable today. Let us have our communication channels open and be grateful to Allah Almighty, who of course provided us this opportunity. We are thankful to Allah Almighty and everyone present here, and especially to close my conversation, this vote of thanks. Today is a special day for all of us, having a learned person, a true Muslim, who said perhaps he was an accidental Muslim. She knows better than us, but she was a very wise, thoughtful person who took, I think, more than 8-9 years to become a Muslim. This process started somewhere in 2000, and for her to become a Muslim, it was in 2010, if I'm not wrong. It was not an accidental decision, it was a very thoughtful decision, and this was what she was speaking from the core of her heart, and it was going to our hearts. Thank you so very much for your presence amongst us. Please do come to us again. We will be feeling honored and privileged to have you amongst us.
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to request Ambassador Tajammul Sahab to present souvenirs from IPS to Sister Lauren Booth.
So, this, sure, all of them. All of them will be.
Thank you so much. This is my Ramadan reading. Oh, beautiful, yes. Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you.